Okay, let's jump right in. We're going back to the late 1830s in the United Kingdom, a time of massive change with the Industrial Revolution.
Right. But for most working people, this change meant, really tough lives.
We're talking low wages, terrible working hours, and living in these crowded, unsanitary cities.
And on top of all that, they felt completely powerless. These were the people, the miners, the factory workers building the country's wealth, but they had zero say in how the country was run.
No voice at all.
None. They couldn't vote. So they couldn't get rid of the politicians making the laws that kept them poor and their jobs dangerous.
And didn't something just happen that made it even worse? The Great Reform Act.
Yes, in 1832.
Huh?
It sounded good, but it really just gave more power to the middle-class factory owners and merchants. The working class, the majority of people, were left out completely.
So they realized the whole system was, well, rigged against them.
Exactly. They saw that the only way to change the laws that were hurting their families was to change who got to be in Parliament in the first place.
And this idea, this need for political power, that's what sparked the Chartist movement.
It was. It all came from their core document, the People's Charter, which they published in 1838.
And this charter is so important because it wasn't just, a list of complaints. It was a clear 6-point plan to fix democracy itself.
A blueprint, really.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is they weren't trying to overthrow the king or anything like that. They just wanted to change the rules so Parliament would actually have to listen to the people.
Okay, so let's break down those 6 demands. What was point number 1?
The big one. Universal suffrage.
Meaning everyone gets to vote.
Well, every man over the age of 21 who was of sound mind. Before this, you basically had to own property to vote.
Ah, so it was tied to wealth.
Completely. The Chartists argued that being a citizen who worked was enough, that you deserved a voice because you were a person, not because you owned a piece of land.
But just getting the vote isn't enough if your boss can see who you vote for and fire you.
You're jumping ahead to point 2, the secret ballot.
It seems so obvious to us now.
But it was a huge deal then. Imagine if you had to vote out loud in public. Your landlord, your employer, they could punish you. The secret ballot was a shield. It made the vote truly free.
Okay, so they can vote, and they can vote in secret, but who are they voting for?
That's point 3. They realized they could only ever choose between rich candidates, so they demanded no property qualifications for MPs.
So you wouldn't have to be wealthy to run for office.
Exactly. They said that wanting to serve the public should be what qualifies you, not how much money you have. They wanted a coal miner to be able to become a member of Parliament.
But a coal miner couldn't afford to just quit his job and go to London for months.
Which leads directly to point 4, payment for MPs.
Right, a salary.
These 2 points have to go together. Without a salary, being an MP is just a hobby for rich guys. Paying them made it a real job that anyone could do.
So smart. They were really thinking about the whole system.
They were. Point 5 was about fairness and how votes were counted. They demanded equal electoral districts.
What was the problem there?
You had these tiny, empty towns, they called them rotten boroughs, that still got to elect 2 MPs.
While a huge new industrial city like Manchester
Might only have 1 MP for hundreds of thousands of people. It was totally unbalanced. Equal districts meant every person's vote would carry roughly the same weight.
one person, one vote.
That's the idea. And the final point, the one that really gave the plan teeth, was point 6, annual parliaments.
Elections every single year.
Every year. The idea was to hold politicians accountable. If they passed a bad law, they couldn't just coast for 5 years. They'd face the voters almost immediately.
Wow, that is a solid plan. But how do you get the people in power to agree to give up that power?
And that is where the movement split right down the middle. This led to a huge clash between 2 of their main leaders.
The moral force versus the physical force argument.
Exactly. It was a really fundamental disagreement on strategy. How should the working class act to get what they want?
So on one side, you have William Lovett. Who was he?
Lovett was a cabinet maker from London. Very thoughtful, very focused on education. He was the champion of moral force.
Meaning peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest, persuasion, and respectability. He believed they had to prove they were intelligent and, deserving of the vote.
So he organized things like pamphlets and meetings.
Yes, very orderly meetings. He even kept writing and organizing from prison. He thought that if they just showed they were morally superior, the government would have to give in eventually.
And on the other side,
You have Fergus O'Connor, a total powerhouse, a brilliant public speaker and owner of the biggest radical newspaper, the Northern Star.
and he was the physical force guy.
He was. His idea wasn't necessarily let's start a violent revolution tomorrow. It was more of a threat.
Like, give us our rights or else.
Precisely. He would hold these gigantic rallies with tens of thousands of people to show the government the sheer strength and anger of the movement. He understood that the powerful are scared of organized masses, and he used that fear.
So the movement had two very different strategies working at once.
Which was both a strength and a weakness. But they decided to try the peaceful way first.
The first Great Petition in 1839.
A massive undertaking.
Yeah.
They collected over 1 million signatures. This is all done by hand, person to person.
And the petition itself was physically huge, right?
So huge and heavy, they had to carry it into the House of Commons in sections. It was like a physical symbol of 1 million people demanding to be heard.
And how did Parliament respond?
They basically laughed it out of the room. They refused to even seriously consider it.
Oh, that must have been crushing.
It was worse than crushing. It was infuriating. It proved to many that Lovett's peaceful moral force approach was useless and that maybe O'Connor was right.
And that anger boiled over pretty quickly.
Almost immediately.
Yeah.
It led to the most famous and bloodiest event of the movement, the Newport Rising.
This was in November of 1839. What happened?
Around 10,000 Welsh miners and iron workers marched on the town of Newport. They wanted to free some Chartist leaders who were being held in jail there.
So this was an armed march.
Yes. They gathered at the Westgate Hotel, but soldiers were waiting for them inside.
And it ended badly.
Very badly. The soldiers opened fire. In just a few minutes, dozens of the marchers were killed or wounded. The leaders were arrested.
What happened to them?
At first, they were sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. A really brutal medieval punishment. But there was a public outcry, so the government changed the sentence to transportation. They were sent to prison colonies in Australia to get them as far away from the movement as possible.
A clear message from the government. Don't cross us.
A very chilling message. But the movement didn't just stop. The big rallies continued, often in these dramatic settings, like on hillsides at night with torches.
That must have looked incredible, but also dangerous.
Very. The government saw these meetings as potential riots and often sent in the army to break them up. Still, it created this powerful sense of unity.
And things got even more desperate a few years later in 1842.
Yes, there was a major economic depression. People were losing their jobs, they were starving, and that desperation fueled the second attempt.
The second petition.
This time, they collected over 3 million signatures, an incredible number. The petition was so enormous, they said it couldn't even fit through the doors of Parliament.
And yet Parliament rejected it again.
Overwhelmingly. And this rejection, combined with the hunger, led to something new. The plug plot strikes.
The what?
The plug plot strikes. It's named for exactly what they did. Workers went into factories and literally pulled the plugs out of the steam boilers.
They're shutting everything out.
Completely. It was a massive general strike.
Yeah.
Linking their need for better pay directly to their demand for the charter. But again, the government just responded with mass arrests.
So petitions aren't working, strikes aren't working. What's left?
Well, Fergus O'Connor came up with a really creative, almost utopian new idea. The Chartist land plan.
What was that about?
O'Connor figured that factory workers in cities were too easy for the government to control. His solution: get them out of the cities and turn them into independent farmers.
How would that even work?
He set up a company. Workers would pay a small subscription fee, and he'd use that money to buy up big country estates.
And then divide the land.
Exactly. He'd divide it into small farms, each with its own cottage. Then members would enter a lottery to win one. The idea was to create a whole new class of independent people who didn't have to answer to a boss.
Did it work? Did people actually move to these farms?
They did. They built several of these little communities called O'Connorvilles, but sadly the whole plan eventually failed.
Why?
It was just too complicated and there were legal problems. He couldn't get it properly registered as a company because the very parliament he was fighting wouldn't let him. The whole thing fell apart.
So even their escape plan was blocked by the system they were trying to change.
Yes. Which brings us to their last big attempt in 1848.
A huge year in Europe, right? Revolutions everywhere.
Revolutions in Paris, Berlin, Vienna. The Chartists felt like this was it. This was their moment. They organized a third petition and a massive rally in London.
And the government must have been terrified.
Absolutely terrified. They put the Duke of Wellington, the guy who beat Napoleon, in charge of defending the city. They brought in thousands of soldiers and even swore in over 100,000 special constables from the middle class to keep order.
So what happened at the rally?
They gathered at a place called Kennington Common. But the police blocked all the bridges, so they couldn't march on Parliament. O'Connor, probably fearing another massacre like Newport, backed down.
So no big march.
No. He agreed to just deliver the petition quietly in a few cabs. And that's when the final, fatal blow landed.
What was that?
The signatures. O'Connor claimed they had almost 6 million. But when officials looked at the petition, they said they were less than 2 million.
That's a huge difference.
It is. But the real damage came from the fake signatures they found.
Fake signatures.
Yeah, silly joke names. Someone had signed as Pugnose, another as Fistulus. They even found Queen Victoria signed on there 3 times.
Oh, that's bad.
It was a disaster. Whether it was done by pranksters or enemies of the movement, it didn't matter. The press and the government used it to make the entire movement look like a joke. A bunch of disorganized fools.
And that was basically the end of Chartism as a big national movement.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
By the 1850s, it had faded away. So it's easy to look back and just say they failed.
Because they never got any of their 6 points passed at the time.
Right. But that's not the whole story. Not even close. What the Chartists did was prove that working-class people could organize themselves on a massive national scale for a political cause. They built a culture of activism.
And most people didn't just disappear.
No, they went on to lead unions and other reform groups. And here's the amazing part. Their ideas won in the end.
How so?
Over the next 50 years, the British government slowly, piece by piece, made almost every single point of the charter into law.
Really? All of them?
Almost all. The secret ballot came in 1872. They got rid of property qualifications for MPs. They started paying MPs. And eventually, they got universal male suffrage and equal voting districts.
So everything except the annual elections.
Exactly. By 1918, they had basically won.
Yeah.
The ideas they fought and suffered for became the foundation of modern democracy in Britain.
So the real legacy is that rights we just assume we have, like voting in private, were once seen as radical ideas that people had to fight for.
Absolutely. The Chartists remind us that the fight for a fairer society is often a long game, and sometimes the biggest victories come long after the first battles are over.
Keep that spirit of curiosity alive and remember who built the foundations we stand on. See you next time.